And this also was given with a will. On the top of that, the three gentlemen went below, and not long after, word was sent forward that Jim Hawkins was wanted in the cabin. I found all of three seated around the table, a bottle of Spanish wine and some raisins before them, and the doctor smoking away with his wig on his lap, and that I knew was a sign that he was agitated. The stern window was open, for it was a warm night, and you could see the moon shining behind on the ship's wake. "Now, Hawkins," said the squire, "you have something to say. Speak up." I did as I was bid, and as short as I could make it, told the whole details of Silver's conversation. Nobody interrupted me till I was done, nor did any one of the three of them make so much as a movement, but they kept their eyes upon my face from first to last. "Jim," said Dr. Livesey, "take a seat." And they made me sit down at a table beside them, poured me a glass of wine, filled my hand with raisins, and all three, one after the other, and each with a bow, drank my good health, and their service to me for my luck and my courage. "Now, Captain," said Squire, "you were right, and I was wrong. I own myself an ass, and I wait your orders." "No more an ass than I, sir," returned the captain. "I never heard of a crew that meant to mutiny, but that showed signs before, for any man that had an eye on his head to see in mischief and take steps accordingly. But this crew," he added, "beats me." "Captain," said the doctor, "with your permission, that's Silver, a very remarkable man. He'd look remarkably well from a yarn arm." "Sir," said the captain, "but this is talk. This don't lead to anything. I see 3 or 4 points, and with Miss Trelawney's permission, I'll name them." "You, sir, are the captain. It is for you to speak," said Mr. Trelawney grandly. "First point," began Mr. Smollett. "We must go on, because we can't turn back. If I gave the word to go about, they would rise at once. Second point, we have time before us, at least until this treasure is found. Third point, there are faithful hands. Now, sir, it's got to come to blows sooner or later, and what I propose is to take time by the forelock, as the saying is, and come to blows some fine day when they least expect it. We can count, I take it, on my own home servants, Mr. Trelawney, as upon myself," declared the squire. "3, reckoned the captain. "Ourselves make 7, counting Hawkins here. Now, about the honest hands. Most likely Trelawney own men," said the doctor, "those he had picked up for himself before he lit on Silver." "Nay," replied the squire, "Hans was one of mine." "I did think I could have trusted Hans," added the captain. "And to think that they're old Englishmen," broke the squire. "Sir, I could find it in my heart to blow the ship up." "Well, gentlemen," said the captain, "the best that I can say is not much. We must lay to, if you please, and keep a bright lookout. It's trying on a man, I know. I would be pleasanter to come to the blows, but there's no help for it till we know our men. Lay to and whistle for a wind. That's my view. Jim here," said the doctor, "can help us more than anyone. The men are not shy with him, and Jim is a noticing lad. Hawkins, I put prodigious faith in you," added the squire. I began to feel pretty desperate at this, for I felt altogether helpless, and yet, by the odd train of circumstances, it was needed through me, that safety came. In the meantime, talked as we pleased, there were only 7 out of 26 on whom we knew we could rely, and out of these 7, one was a boy, so that the grown men on our side were 6 to their 19. Part 3. My Shore Adventure. How my shore adventure began. The appearance of the island, when I came on the deck next morning, was altogether changed. Although the breeze had now utterly ceased, we had made a great deal of way during the night, and we were now lying becalmed about half a mile to the southeast of the low eastern coast. Grey-colored woods covered a large part of the surface. This event tint was indeed broken up by streaks of yellow sandbreak on the lower sands, and by many tall trees of pine family, outtopping the others, some singly, some in clumps, but in general coloring was uniform and sad. The hills ran up clear above the vegetation in spires of naked rock. All were strangely shaped, and the spyglass, which was by 300 or 400 feet the tallest on the island, was likewise the strangest in the configuration, running up sheer from almost every side, and then suddenly cut off at the top like a pedestal to put a statue on. The Hispaniola was rolling scuppers under the ocean swell. The booms were tearing at the blocks, the rudder was banging to and fro, and the whole ship creaking, groaning, and jumping like a manufactory. I had to cling tight to the backstay, and the world turned giddily before my eyes. For though I was a good enough sailor when it was way on, the standing still and being rolled about like a bottle was a thing I never learned to stand about calm so, above all in the morning, on an empty stomach. Perhaps it was this, perhaps it was the look of the island, with its grey, melancholy woods, and the wild stone spires, that the surf that we could both see and hear foaming and thundering on the stepped beach, at least, although the sun shone bright and hot, and the shores birds were fishing and crying all around us, and you would have thought anyone would have been glad to get to land after being so long at sea. My heart sank, as the saying is, into my boots, and from the first look onward, I hated the very thought of the treasure island. We had a dreary morning's work before us, for there was no sign of any wind, and the boats had to be got out and manned, and the ship wrapped 3 or 4 miles around the corner of the island and up the narrow passage to heaven behind Skeleton Island. I volunteered for one of the boats, where I had of course no business. The heat was sweltering, and the men grumbled fiercely over their work. Anderson was in command of my boat, and instead of keeping the crew in order, he grumbled as loud as the worst. "Well," he said, with an oath, "it's not forever." I thought this was a very bad sign, for up to that day the men had gone briskly and willingly about their business, but the very sight of the island had relaxed the cords of discipline. In the way in, Long John stood by the steersman and counted the ship. He knew the passage like the palm of his hand, and though the men in the chains got everywhere more water than was down in the chart, John never hesitated once. "There's a strong score with the ebb," he said, and this here passage had been dug out, in the manner of speaking, with a spade. We brought up just where the anchor was in the chart, about a third of a mile from each shore, and the mainland on one side and Skeleton Island on the other. The bottom was clean sand. The plunge of our anchor sent up clouds of birds wheeling and crying over the woods, but in less than a minute they were down again, and all was once more silent. The place was utterly landlocked, buried in woods, the trees coming right down to high water mark, and the shores mostly flat, and the hilltops standing around at the distance in a sort of amphitheater, one here and one there. 2 little rivers, or rather 2 swamps, emptied out into this pond, as you might call it, and the foliage around the part of the shore had a kind of poisonous brightness. From the ship we could see nothing of the house or stockade, for they were quite buried among trees. If it had not been for the chart on the companion, we might have been the first that ever had anchored there, since the island arose out of the seas.